All righty. Good morning, everyone. Melissa Sherman here with the Michigan Lean Consortium Board of Directors. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our speaker this morning. We have Rick Hassman. He's built a respected reputation as an incredible advocate for change in the roles of CEO at Lean Tech Advisors. He's been Chief Information Officer at Pella Corporation, a VP of Custom Advocacy at Oracle, a VP of Business Development at Duco Labs, and practice lead for MFG, CPG, and retail. He is a technology strategist, passionate about leading transformation initiatives that focus on business value through process optimization and elimination of waste. With that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Rick.
Oh, thank you, Melissa. Can you guys hear me fine?
Yes.
Yes.
That's great. Because I normally, when I start meetings, I mess something up from a technology standpoint. So let's hope we're off to a good start. Again, my name's Rick Hassman. I live in just south of Charleston, South Carolina. If anyone's familiar with Kiowa or Seabrook Island, I live in that area, which seems like every day is a little bit of a vacation sometimes. So I've been in the manufacturing space and technology space my entire career. I actually started as a production manager, was a plant manager for a toy company, Ertl Toys, the toys that make like the sandbox toys, the die cast that you'd use in the sandbox. If you say sandbox anymore, I don't know if kids even know what that is, what a sandbox is. But and then I like to say I got handpicked to lead the system implementation. In reality, I was the only plant manager that could log on to a computer. So that switched and led me into this career where it's really combining manufacturing, technology, ERP systems, CPQ systems, you name it, anything that's involved with the capture and management of orders. And that's what led me, I think, later in my career to the topic we're going to talk about today. Pella was very embedded in its manufacturing operations. We had, when I left, over it was close to 2,500 direct connections to machines on our shop floors throughout all of our plants. Was feeding data, you know, and we were moving into robotics, but there was a gap. There was still a gap that we were getting optimization in small parts of the process, but not maybe the gains we were looking for. So that's what I'm going to talk today about, the ability to elevate the power of Industry 4.0 with AI and ML. So it's really that, you know, the machine learning and then process mining. And process mining might be new to a lot of people. So I'm going to take you into that. I'd like it to be very interactive. So if you've got any questions, feel free to ask me, stop me as we go through it, and then we'll go from there. So, you know, this isn't new. I like to start it this way, but, you know, everybody knows costs are going up, supply chain. I think when we went through the COVID, it was, you know, interesting to watch the disruption go from, you know, sourcing, you know, through the logistics to get material there to the labor to make the material. And in each one of those areas, it identified inefficiencies in our processes. It was kind of an awakening. And a lot of people turn to Industry 4.0 and to address the labor issue in many cases, or some of it in the visibility to see where material was in the process. But at a high level, Industry 4.0 is kind of this evolution that you see from the left, from mass production to automation to what they'll call smart factories. I love the way that these terms come up and how you evolve there when a lot of this stuff intermixes, and there's nobody that's just 100% Industry 4.0. It's a combination of this and all the plants, and everybody's on a journey. But you can see some of the key things in Industry 4.0. I take a little deeper dive into that. This to me is this kind of convergence of 9 digital industries. So if you look through these, and maybe your companies have some of these, most of these, none of these, all of these, but this is what it is. It's the advanced robotics, 3D printing, augmented reality, simulations, but then it also includes, because the mass amount of data, it gets into the cybersecurity and the analytics and the cloud. So they group all of that together. Bottom line, Industry 4.0 is the term I think they say is IIoT, industrial Internet of Things, and it's the capturing of all of that data. And there's been mass amounts of data that get captured. And to be honest with you, the most companies that I'm working with don't even realize they're capturing it. They don't know that that information's there, let alone are able to use that. And so as I was saying, there are the challenges, a lot of the challenges and the opportunities. So when you look to the left on this screen, the reason people are doing it, the reason people are going are direct cost savings. It could be a labor specific savings. It can be the indirect, which, allows the utilization of machine for a longer part of time, or the reduction of handling, or, anything that they have. Improvement of customer experience. These are the common things that any initiative would be looking to do. But when you look in the middle, and this is where we're going to spend some time today, the big challenges. This is a big change. I mean, this is a big change for companies, and one of the key things for this Industry 4.0 is the exact same thing. It's a different way of doing work, and people are resistant. Number 2, we're going to spend a lot of time on is the integration of IT and OT. So IT at the highest level is, think of your ERP systems, your CRM, your application data that you use to create paperwork, to do transactions in, and then combining that with the OT. And the OT is the operational, and that's a lot of what's in the Industry 4.0. That's the PLCs. That's the sensor data that you have, robotics data. I would tell you 80+ % of the companies that I talk with keep these separate. Now there's a handoff that they get data that maybe gets passed to the machine, but they truly aren't working together. And that's another thing that we're going to talk about today, because I think there's a huge opportunity when you combine these two. And then again, we all know this, the technical depth. You've got legacy equipment, you've got old machines. So, there's a cost. It's hard in many cases to modernize some of the machines. But when you look at it, there's still a lot of effort going on, and you can see that over to the right that 73% of the companies have experience, but it's less than 2 years. 70% saying that they've made slow but minimal progress, but it is on the roadmap. And then less than 70% actually have put a structure in place. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions or thoughts. I wanted to really just level set before we go too far around Industry 4.0. Does that make sense for everyone?
There are no questions in the chat, Rick.
Okay.
Anybody can feel free to come off mute and speak.
Yeah, please. So to summarize, what we're seeing with the Industry 4.0 is that it is very beneficial, but it's not enough. And you can see it's a pretty large number that 72% are not achieving their expected results. There's very high expectations, and the challenges, just as we said before, it's very much a focus on technology, not on process. It's myopic in its view in many cases. It's trying to fix a very specific problem, but it doesn't look at the process as a whole. Its inability to connect the data. That's what I mentioned, the IT and the OT. It's really hard to connect that information and make sense out of it. And many companies, because of those reasons, are finding it difficult to go beyond pilot. The one thing that is very apparent, the Industry 4.0 initiatives, just like IoT initiatives in all parts of our life, is creating a significant amount of data, but it's being created and kept in disparate solutions. And I'll show that here in just a minute. So what we really need in this is the ability to utilize the real-time data, because the Industry 4.0 with machines and everything is capturing data very quickly. I mean, it's as it's happening. That's why we use it in the manufacturing plants, from the sensors to raise red flags. It's capturing data real time. But we want to use that data to analyze a process. And within that process, just as we talk about with Lean, my company is called Lean Tech Advisors, and its purpose is to identify waste and address it with technology. Well, if you can use that real-time data to analyze a process that then identifies waste, that's the battle. I mean, that's, when you're sitting in a Kaizen event, and I've sat in hundreds and hundreds of Kaizen events, to gather the data, to document the process, then identify the waste, in many cases is the big problem. That's what, if you do that well, it will, the answers many times come to you. But one thing that, and I talk about Industry 4.0 and all of the changes, one thing that has stayed very consistent, all of the years of continuous improvement, staying profitable and competitive really requires people just to always be improving. That'll never go away. So now let me talk, I'm going to talk today about two different ways to address this problem that I've talked about. One is process mining, and one is AI and ML, which utilize a lot of the same things. So let's talk about process mining first. So I like to simplify things. The old way when you go through process optimization is on the left. And when I say the old way, I've just within the last month, I've done multiple events, and of course we still do this. And I'm sure this is very familiar with this group. Mapping out the process, identifying, where the waste is. But you think about how costly this can be. The benefits far outweigh, but if there was a way to improve process mapping, it would be over onto the right, which is the new way. So the new way is transactional systems that's capturing real-time data that will automatically create that digital map for you. And so once you've done that and created the map, and then you identify, where a lot of those gaps are, you then can, as a group, brainstorm, well, how do I address these? And there's some real benefits of having that digital twin, because now you'll get to see the real results of, when something happened. So another way of looking at this from a process mining perspective is you've got all of your systems, and these are just examples, of Ariba, SAP, you've got Workday. In those systems, they are creating three things that you need for to create a process map. They have an activity. So the activity, think about it as, let's start with the case ID. Case ID is the connector. So let's take an example outside of manufacturing. The case ID is your order. And then a sales order that comes in. Then you have an activity, and the activity that occurs to it, it could be the approval of it, it could be a price change, it could be that it changes a status, that it goes into in process, it can go on hold. Any of those activities that happen, when they happen in your system, they create, the activity is created, and there's a timestamp that's associated with it. So if you have the connector, the case ID, and you can see every activity that happens and in the timestamp, it then shows for each order the exact process and the amount of time it took to perform the activity and the amount of time it took between each step. And I'll show you that in a little more detail. But that's the core. The core of process mining is the ability to have a link and create and capture activities on it and the timestamps. So if I think when you think about it from an order perspective, that makes sense. People are acting against that order. They're doing transactions in the systems. They're capturing all of that. Well, if you go to manufacturing, we have to do something a little bit different. And a little bit different means that capturing of the data is happening in disparate systems. I mean, it can be happening as we see these different devices, scanners, PLCs. It could be coming from an equipment, and they're not logging into, in many cases, your ERP systems to do a transaction. But, and I'll show you in the demo, you can link these in many cases, because it is, you're doing an action in this system. It may be associated to a production order. in many cases. Or as you scan a device and you scan a traveler that's going through, it may be in many cases associated to an item that's associated to a production order. You can make the connections as you go through that. Normally, these all go back to different databases. I mean, they go back to your PLM system, your ERP, or many of them are in a SQL Server from scanners. The job of process mining then is to do the exact same thing that I showed before. Make some connector, whether it's a production order, could be a pick order in the warehouse system. It could be a purchase order, and grab the activities that you have and the timestamps, then create that view, because it will know what flow it is based on when the action actually happened. And that's what creates this digital twin. So before I go into the demo, does that make sense for folks?
Did that answer your question too, Josh, that you put in the chat?
Yep, I was just going to say right after I got done typing it, he used the perfect example that cleared it up. So yes, I'm good now.
Perfect.
Okay, so now I mentioned that I have had technical problems. It could happen now as I try and switch over to a demo. And everyone's told me when I was at Pella, they said never let a CIO do a demo. But I did record this, so let me know.
So Rick, on your end, are you finding that you're saving, are you still going into these businesses to do any kind of mapping outside of an initial meet and greet? Or are you staying pretty much virtual at this point, and that's as your particular company, you're saving, where you're saving a little bit of money because you're not having to travel?
What I'm finding really right now is this is an evolution. In some cases, we have to kind of identify the data sources. We have to kind of map through at a high level, what transactions are being done. So there's usually, and you could do that virtually, but in many cases, you would do that, in person. I think the other piece is when you look at this, the actual problem solving of it in many cases still might lead to a Kaizen event. Well, let's look at, how do I lay out the line? But what it does is it focuses you really quickly into where the problems are. And sometimes it doesn't. So it's still a mix, whether I'm on site or not.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah. So are you guys seeing the production control tower?
We are.
Okay. Wow.
Is there supposed to be, well, I know you're not playing yet, but is there supposed to be any sound with it?
No.
Okay.
No,
So
I'm
I
going
won't
to
raise my hand and stop you for that one.
I'm going to talk through it. This
Okay.
is my way of not getting messed up in a demo. I'm just going to slide the bar and talk you through it.
Perfect.
I've learned many times not to not try and do something live. So let's take the example. And when I created this as an example of a manufacturing plant, and there's two different, in this plant, I really simplified it. There's a file line and a paint line, just to show you the examples. And this here is in many cases, it's a dashboard that you could probably create today from your production information. You know, you could get your on-time completions, you could look at your scrap levels, and you know, you get your OEE, through the different calculations. What I want to talk to is when you start looking down at the final line, and you start looking at this as a day view, you start realizing, well, my units for today, my goal was 700, and I got 639. And I remember this so distinctly when I was a plant manager. If that happened and I looked at it, I would then pick up the phone and call either my line supervisor, or I'd go down to the line and try and figure it out. And sometimes they had hour by hour tracking, and I've seen it happen so many times that they're doing the hour by hour tracking. They get 4 hours behind. They go back and they're like, oh crap, I don't remember exactly what happened that slowed us down. So I'd pick up the phone. Well, what we're doing here is that if we're mapping, every production unit that goes through, and this is, it is a window example, just so as you look, but the paint is more of a process. But if you could take that and say, well, let me drill down, and you can see here just its normal analytics and dashboards. But if I want to then say, well, let me go look at the final line. I had my 639, my plan was over here. I look at my cycle time and I'm like, I'm over. I'm over by quite a bit on my cycle time. This here is the map that we talked about that can get created. It's a process map. And the way this is created is when they start the process that they're scanning the unit at the front of the line. So they're scanning a traveler, and I picked 4 operations. This could be 20 operations as you look at it, but I wanted to use these to explain this combination. The combination occurs of where you get this data is when it goes through the clamp. This clamp actually scans a traveler, and an operator is, I think they're validating something. I don't remember exactly what it was. But what the clamp also does is scans, it sends a note to a timer. And the timer in this case is this is a pace line. So I don't know if people are familiar with a pace line, but it picks certain operations and it counts down. The cycle time is supposed to be 60 seconds or whatever it's supposed to be. It counts down, and then if all of the units on the pace line, all of the key operations on the pace line haven't completed, it'll show you which operations, and it counts and it keeps track of it. Well, bottom line, they were using it just as a visual key, but it was capturing data. They didn't realize, but yeah, it was capturing every time it cycled. So we knew every unit that went through there because they were scanning it, and we knew the count because of that. The hardware installation, we captured the data in a different way. That was a pokeyoke. So as the units flew through to where they were putting the hardware in, they scanned the traveler, and then it brought up a screen that says this needs champagne hardware. Then they scanned the champagne hardware so that it matched. So it was just a simple pokeyoke. Well, that wasn't a transaction in the system, but it did a call to the database that we used because it was calling to that production order to see what hardware should be used. So it was a call to the database. Well, that gave us a timestamp. So we knew that timestamp was the hardware. So if you think back to what I said you need the common connector, which is the production order. You need the activity, which is where the data was captured. So we knew it was the clamp or the hardware installation. And we needed the timestamp. Well, we were getting that because of the calls to the database. Well, as all this 639 units went through, you can see timestamps for each unit that's going through. So you start seeing queue times and you start seeing cycle times. So if you look over here, the cycle time that's supposed to be for each of these, we looked at over here which cycle times and which clamps or which of the operations are over. So this is saying that the clamp on average is 3.7 seconds over in its cycle time. So if you start thinking about that, you want to drill down and say, well, what's causing that? So that in itself, what we just did, would be very hard in the normal operations, and unless you had somebody out with a stopwatch keeping track of all of this. So let's drill down, and what I'll do is drill down into the clamp operation. So now we're in the clamp operation, and we can see the cycle time was 44. Well, if you remember what we had said before, we wanted it to be 40. It was almost 3 seconds over, or a little over 3 seconds. We've got all of the detail down in here that would say, because we're connecting the IT data now, so when you think of the IT, this is the data that's sitting in your ERP systems. We know for each unit went through, we know their size, we know, in here the number of nails, the color, whatever that is. But in this example, what we looked at was, well, my cycle time is causing the problem in here. When I looked at this, we broke it down into categories, and you can see that the units 1,500 or larger had significantly, that's a big gap when you see the 20-second cycle time increase. So that in itself is, wow, didn't realize, or you think about the timings that you have in the machine and what causes these delays. That's what the power of this is. It gets you to the problem right away. And what you can do is say, well, let me real time deselect those. So I took those out and said, if I remove those from the operation, what would happen? Well, you can see that the number of units that we were talking about was 33, and it did bring the cycle time down by that amount. So this would just be an example of quickly saying, I got a problem. I look down, I see that my cycle time on my clamp operation is over. Let me dig down into it, and I identify that the size of the units going through there are what's causing the problem. So this is just one example. I got examples in here where the packaging, the type of material, whether it's shrink wrap, or cardboard or bubble wrap shows the cycle times, but it also then can compare who's actually the operator. So I'm going to jump over to a different example. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? What I showed there?
See, Josh had nodding because he's on camera. Just a quick thing, Rick. Will there be a link to this demo in the slide deck when you share it, or can there be?
Let me. I think I can. Let me figure out where I would save it.
Okay.
Just so.
Oh, for
I
access.
don't know
Yep.
if I have a public access, but let me. I'm sure I can create something. I'll work with. I've got a partner company that that is that can do that type of stuff for me. So I'll talk to them.
Okay.
So now let's look at a paint line, which a paint line is a little bit more like a flow. You know, if you're and this is where you're hanging stuff and it's going through booths. Well, that flow, the cycle times don't change that much when you think about that, because it's a continuous flow as you go through there. But there are factors that really can make a difference as you go through. And just want to jump into an example around humidity. So this is an example of pulling in something completely outside. So if you think about the booth where they're hand spraying, what we looked at on this is we knew when units were passing through. Each of the units had barcodes on them. So we knew when they passed a spot in the line. That would give us the time. But we also then, from the booth, was capturing temperature within the booth and capturing humidity. And we could see when they were painting that the cycle time increased when the humidity level went up, as you can see it. When you look at it, it's like, okay, that makes sense. But what we found, which is really is something to me that kind of sets this apart, because normal analytics is really hard to connect different parts of operations together. What we found, because we know each unit that went through, when we looked at the scrap or the rework at the end of the line, we found that any unit that went through at 49 to 51, anything that was 49 or higher, 100% of those units got scrapped. So cycle time was a little, yeah, that's a concern. But this is a big, I mean, this is a huge concern when you start looking at it and saying, wow, if that humidity level gets anywhere close to that, I know I've got a big problem down the road. So that's just so I wanted to give you a time-based example and a quality-based example in the demo. So does let me jump back out. So any questions on the demo?
I feel like you left me high and dry with the humidity. How did we correct that? Did you discover how to correct it?
Well, basically, when we have something like that, that's when we start putting the parameters or alarms into the humidity. So we're like, you know, in many of these cases, it's kind of like the a Kaizen event in itself. And when you go into the Kaizen event, you're saying, I've got a quality problem. Well, with this data here, it shows a quality problem, but it also gives you a root cause of the quality problem. So then what you would do is say, at that booth, I need to actually have either an alarm that goes off or have a shutdown that occurs or something in that booth when the humidity level reaches a certain level.
Yeah, because in that situation, it'd be better to shut it down versus having all the
Yes,
scrap. Right.
right,
That
right.
makes sense.
And that's part of what you know, in some of these cases it can autocorrect within the system. In many cases, it's just getting you to that answer quicker than you would,
Mhm.
and then you have to take the action
Yeah.
as
Thank
you
you.
go through. You know, we did one where we were tracking the cycle time on units going through the line. Well, when it's individual windows that was going through the line in a factory that makes windows, if there's a problem or missing part, they many times take that unit and they set it aside. I saw the same thing for a cabinet company. You know, I've seen it for some furniture companies where they just pull the unit off the line. Well, they didn't track anything on that. They just pulled it off the line and somebody went and either got the unit or they waited for the part. Well, we could see based on the timestamp that that unit, you know, didn't make it from operation B to operation C in a period of time. So we just wrote language into this view that says if it hasn't made it this long, put it into a set off. So that gave them visibility of what was set off their line. And then also then when you see what's getting set off, it was, you know, it ended up being a certain hardware that was knew how long they sat off the line. Because once you put it back on the line, then you would see the next step for that unit. So you could see that, I mean, some of these on average were sitting off the line for 12 hours. I mean, it was pretty crazy. So I see we got about 10 minutes left. So there are some struggles with process mining. Using just the inherent tool for process mining, the data transformation needs to be managed in a third-party system. Most of the data that's coming from a machine or a sensor is not in a readable format. So you need to, in many cases, just transform it. Now, it's not a complicated thing to do, but it's just another step that you need to transform that. It does limit in some data types that you can use. That also then says, well, I can maybe not be able to build all the analytics that I would like to. And you pull it in and use a different analytics tool that help with some of the reporting. And in process mining, the tools that I've seen are very purpose built. And a lot of them focus on like the core applications like order processing, purchasing, AP, AR, and you know transactions that are happening, and they're pulling the data directly from the transactional system and not combining the IoT data. So those are just some, and we can overcome all of those, but just as I started looking and exploring there's another option, and I've seen this, the very specific example that I work with is Oracle. Oracle takes the same data, but because it's a database company, it can ingest the data, understand it, and transform it in the same application. And it combines the data, so it can actually model it, give you the different views. And just a quick look at this would be, and this would be an example where, again, it can pull from PLC. It can actually bring in image stuff, and that's where it's a little bit, a downside of the process is, video. It can actually transform and look at notes and take it from an unstructured and contextualize it as part of its data transformation. So it's the same thing. It's pulling. It's just this built-in capability to transform your data all within one process. And then it's got inherent learning and AIs where it looks at the information and can get very predictive. I don't have a demo of that. The concept's the same. So when I look at this, I go back, and I actually started a class at the local high school when I was in Iowa called Kaizen, the Theory of Continuous Improvement. And the basis of it, the class was taught around DMAIC. And each section took them through this. And when you think about what I just showed you, it aligns with DMAIC. Define. Well, define, the way you define that problem is you create that full view. You identify and you can see where the anomalies are. Then you measure it, which you're measuring exactly what's happening. You're creating the dashboards, you're analyzing it with the dashboards, and then you improve. And the last two, the improve and control, in Kaizen events and many of them that I've went through, you go through the define, the measure, the analyze, you put a plan in place to go out and improve, and then there's always so much debate on whether it actually did the improvement or some other process improvement was the one that drove it, and then to track it and maintain it. I always said, at the end of a Kaizen event, it was somebody's job to roll up the white paper with all the sticky notes, put a rubber band on it, and take it back to their office and act like they're going to look at it again. This, because it's a real-time view, you can make the change and then truly start seeing, did it impact my cycle time? Did it impact my quality as you measure it? And it gives you that continuous view to maintain and transform. So in summary, really elevating the power of Industry 4.0 with MI, ML, and process mining. What it's about is giving you a deep understanding that helps you identify and improve, and then truly monitor for continuous improvement. So I think we have 4 minutes left.
Got one
Yeah,
question
10.
right now.
Yep, I was just going to jump in. So, Jane, did you have a question? I seen Adam have his hand up.
Nope, just Adam.
I know I'm a pain today. So my question is so Oracle sit so you can leverage Oracle without making major changes to IT systems within an organization. So almost putting it in front, having it reach into those systems, if you will, pulling the information back to you so you can analyze it. So there's not a major disruption to the work, if that's how I'm understanding it.
Yes.
Kind of. Okay.
Yes. And neither of them are really a disruption. I mean, they both are what I call edge applications, that sit outside. The process mining piece in the company that I work closely with was Celonis. But IBM and there's some others, I think Blue Prism or actually they sit outside, but what they have to do is they don't have the capability to do some of the transformation. They don't have the capability to contextualize.
To build
They
out
are-
your model, to build your model ultimately.
Yes, you have to accept the data.
Right.
You have to transform the data before you import it into it. But it does the view that you get, like the process view. That's the unique thing within process mining, is that it truly can create that visual for you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other questions out there? Not seeing hands raised or anybody off mute. Nothing in the chat. Thank you, Rick, for your time today. For those that are still on the call, we will be sending out the slide deck once we get it from Rick. And then also remember, we'll be sending out a survey. So please take the time to complete that survey. It helps not only us as the MLC to improve where we need to improve for coffee chats, but we can give feedback to Rick if there's any way that he needs to tweak upon his presentation. Again, appreciate your time this morning, Rick, and those on the call. With that, do you have any closing remarks, Rick? If not,
no, and I guess the only thing I will put a little bit of a plug in. My contact information is there. This is one of the components. It's kind of like when you think of continuous improvement, it's a tool bag. So I focus on applications, helping people with their technology strategy. This is just a problem that I would come across and needed to identify a possible solution. But if anybody needs any help or anything with whether it be shop floor or whether it's your transactional systems, be more than happy to help.
thank you. With that, everybody enjoy their Friday. Where I'm at here in West Michigan, the sun is shining, so that's a positive. And have a great weekend, everyone.
Oh,
You too.
I did forget to tell everybody that I'm an Iowa fan.
Oh boy.
A Hawkeye
better
fan,
than Ohio.
So I thought I would I'd leave that for the end.
You said
All right,
Ohio,
thanks,
we would have
everyone.
hung up on you. You wouldn't even had a conflict.
Exactly.
It would have been a bad deal.
Yeah, well, we have the Michigan quarterback now, the old one, Cade McNamara.
Yeah,
It's
you guys will
Iowa's
start
quarterback.
winning again. That's how about that.
And
All right, I gotta go on that.
all right, thanks, everyone.
Have a good one,
All right.
everyone.
Yeah, good luck.
Bye.
Bye.